All right, Natasha. We are
Hello.
back for episode 3 of Fast Forward, presented by CAD Management and Austere Visuals. We have an amazing panel set up for today to really talk about the changing record label business and the volatility and the opportunities that labels have as a whole to really either capitalize or just honestly just kind of survive during this time. So really excited to have Mark Stewart here. He runs RZ3 Recordings, formerly Red Zone Entertainment, probably one of the most successful record labels just in general, but particularly in Atlanta. And his background is just amazing. And then we have Jesse Kirshbaum here, CEO of NUE Agency, probably one of the best music thought leaders, brand marketers, and former artist manager. He's pretty much done it all. So we're really excited to have them both here to talk about the shift of this business and just really what it means to be in the record business right now. So we're going to bring them both in to talk about a little bit about their backgrounds before we get started. Hey, guys.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Natasha, Clayton, how are you?
How you doing? Good.
Pretty good.
Great.
Amazing. Yeah, so Mark, why don't we just start with you?
Hey, Jesse, how are you?
Why don't you just kind of give us a little bit of background?
I'm okay, Mark.
Oh, is he frozen?
Nope, I think we're good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so Mark, I just figured you can just give us a little background on your company and some of the things that you've done in your career, just to kind of give our audience a little background on you.
Maybe he is frozen.
Oh, maybe he is frozen. All right, well,
just jump over to Jesse.
Yeah, Jesse. Yeah, we'll jump over to you real quick. Yeah, no worries. Hold on, we'll jump over to you. All right, Jesse. So yeah, hit us up. Give us a little bit of background on NUE Agency and some of the stuff you're doing.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me. So NUE Agency essentially started in the artist representation business. We were finding and developing talent, doing it in a new way, and had a lot of success very early on, finding extraordinary artists and helping them break, utilizing technology, utilizing obscure markets or underutilized markets, and really just being in the trenches with artists and helping them figure out how to connect to their fans. And then about 5 years ago, we shifted the business model. My brother, Alex Kirshbaum, and I, and our team, and we shifted the business model to working with brands. And right now, the thesis is that in many ways, brands are going to be a huge revenue source in the music business. And there needs to be a gap or like a bridge built between brands and artists and platforms. And so that's what we're really focused on, is culture marketing, connecting brands to their consumers by leveraging entertainment.
That's awesome. Clay, yeah, there you go. That's really cool. I mean, that's a really awesome background. I didn't know that you guys are shifting over and you started with your brother. I think that's really interesting. And
thanks,
Natasha.
Like
we have Mark back here too.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. As soon as we said go, all of a sudden I just everything.
Yeah, no worries. We're in quarantine, so we're all good. But
okay.
Continue so.
So do you want to go ahead and give us a rundown too, Mark? A little bit more background about you, your business.
Yeah. Just quickly here. Myself, my brother, and my wife have been operating Red Zone Entertainment for many, many years, 25 years plus. In the last sort of year and a half, 2 years, we didn't really even make the official announcement, but we sort of phased out of what our normal business was, which was record production. My brother Tricky produced a lot of big records for the Rihannas of the world, the Beyoncés of the world, and Justin Bieber and the whole nine. And when we moved back to Atlanta a few years ago, we decided to sort of shift our focus to more specifically in the artist business. We had always been in the artist business in a way, but it was sort of secondary to producing records. And now we're taking on more of a management and advisory role in artist careers, which is why we changed the name. We rebranded to RZ3, which is the third iteration of Red Zone. And so that's the new focus, is to really focus on artists. And then just when we're getting ready to launch our first artist, we get hit with a pandemic. So now we're figuring that out.
Damn. Yeah. It's the times. It's the times. What can you do?
But you have to adjust. You have to be nimble and adjust, and we're doing our best. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that kind of sets us up good for our first, question of, the panel is obviously the coronavirus has officially ended the longest economic expansion in U.S. history. And many economists agree that, we're in a recession. I don't really think that there's much argument about it. But, with as much uncertainty as we saw in 2008, business models are changing across the board. So I'm really curious to really get your guys' perspective, and maybe Mark, we can start with you. With so much economic uncertainty around how quickly the economy will recover, how do you see label executives and boards thinking about the economy and the impact that this will have on their business long term?
Okay, so from a label, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it from the major label perspective. I spend a lot of time thinking about it from our perspective. What we're trying to do, and you used the word a little bit earlier, survive. We're trying to survive sort of the moment, because the end game is always, as you guys know, is to be on the road, to get to have success so that your artist can tour. And obviously that's been turned upside down at the moment. So the focus for all of our artists is to sort of continue to build awareness, to build their fan bases, and to really just try to super serve them with content. Really just getting as much sort of connection between artists and public and, and fan base as you possibly can in this moment. Without that, you're sort of just sitting stagnant, waiting for things to sort of reset themselves. And that's kind of a weird place to be. So the focus for us right now has just been, let's try to put out music, let's keep feeding music. And that's something that we have access to, that we have a lot of, and then also trying to find ways for our artists to connect with their audiences.
Yeah, and Jesse, let's toss this over to you. I mean, I know you don't necessarily come from the label background, but you've worked with labels, you've managed and done a lot of work with artists at major labels. So I'm really curious to get your thoughts here.
I think that originally a lot of people were holding back on putting out music, especially superstars, because they weren't going to be able to put a tour to it. Back in the past, you used to put out an album. You used to go on tour to support an album. But in recent years, there's been so much money in the live space that you put out an album to support a tour. And right now, the whole world is kind of in flux. And as things start to reintegrate, I think it's pretty clear that live music, large scale shows, festivals are not going to come back anytime soon. So with that said, I think you can't just sit on the music, right? You can't just sit on music. Does have a shelf life. And I feel like a lot of artists now need to start coming out with strategies to put out records in this current climate and this new era. And there's a lot of opportunity for that because people are starving for new content. And there's a great chance that you can, if you can cut through the noise, you can make a big impact. And so we're constantly trying to think about how to do that.
Yeah, and that actually leads me to my next question, which really is, touring is something we don't even want to think about right now because it's not an option. And seeing how streaming has become pretty much oversaturated with all of the different artists trying to do festivals and shows and all those things at this point, I feel like we're all kind of getting sick and tired of seeing that. What have you guys been seeing in the industry that's really like shaking things up, looks interesting, and is actually being a more interesting type of marketing strategy that labels can start paying attention to and start doing for their teams and their artists?
One of the things that I've noticed that's happening, which I think is kind of cool, I have to figure out a way to incorporate my artists into it, but what Timbaland and Swizz are doing with their beat challenges and the verses brand that they're building. I think that's super cool. What they've been able to do with starting with producers and then writers and now with artists is really create a lot of engagement, just bringing artists together, having them sort of talk and tell stories and press play on their records. And people are coming in the hundreds of thousands to engage. Yeah, I've seen other people popping up. My good friend Chris Hicks and some guys that he's working with put together a series called Mastery, which is guys sitting around, a couple, producers talking to producers, writers talking to writers. And I think that's ways, like once these guys sort of get their audiences locked in, and I think in the Timbaland Swiss case, it is locked in, is sort of trying to find a way to get your artist into that discussion where you can sit and press play and expose your music and expose what your artist is about to a large captive audience. And it's been, since the pandemic started, it's been sort of a point in television since the first week, and it's just grown and gotten bigger every week. So it's little things like that where people are sort of, just being creative in the moment and creating content and gathering audiences and then sort of figuring out how people can get involved with that after the fact.
Love that. What about you, Jesse? Any things you've seen that have been interesting?
Yeah, you can't do the traditional press junket. So all of a sudden, we see it with like artists like Jessie Reyez, who released a big album, was she could do the press junket all from her bedroom. You can go to every radio station, speak to every major media outlet, and essentially cover so much ground without having to get on a plane, without having to get your hair and makeup done. Something that would take 30 days of touring press-wise, you can cover all of that ground because everybody's looking for content, and you can do it all from the palm of your hand in a couple afternoons. So I find that to be fascinating. I also feel like you're seeing innovation. Lion Babe, whose manager is Leroy, is a real crafty guy, came up with a concept to do a virtual tour. So essentially they're playing venues, Instagram channels, and all over the world from their house, from their respective houses, quarantined, they can do a massive tour. Now, there isn't necessarily revenue in that, but there's exposure, there's brand awareness, there's goodwill, because no question about it, when this pandemic is over, it's about building fan base and connection, like Mark said. And then at that point, you go back and you benefit from that, from those fans that remember that you were out there doing these type of things early on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that, leads really nicely into, our next kind of topic here is, we saw that Epic Records Senior Vice President, Head of Marketing, David Bell, went on the record with Rolling Stone this week where he noted that there have been various functional changes within the record label system just at Epic alone, and he's seeing that across the board. More specifically, and I'll quote this, he said, every aspect of a record company now has a digital aspect to it. And if it doesn't change, it may get left behind. So for instance, he noted that Epic's tour marketing team, which is usually responsible for facilitating physical marketing, pivoted directly to 100% digital, making itineraries and schedule for all their artists' digital showings. So I guess, maybe Mark, we could, kick it over to you because I know, you've worked at Epic in the past. Operationally, like, how do you see, like, what are the challenges associated with this massive digital shift for record labels in an area that traditionally hasn't been this digitally, hasn't had to have this much digital transformation, and I don't even know how many years. Like, it could be made an argument ever.
Yeah, it's well, first of all, I worked with Dave a few years ago when I was at Epic, and I think he actually left and maybe came back or whatever. But I worked with Dave, real bright guy. I think it's a little scary. I have an artist, in a joint venture with Epic at the moment, and but this would be for any label. They have to shift what they're doing. But you don't want your artist to get caught up in while they're trying to basically figure it out. You're trying to figure it out on your own, kind of what I alluded to earlier, sort of set a pace for what you want to do, keep your fans intact. And then when they get it figured out, then you sort of intersect where you can. Because their functionality, I have a new artist there putting out a debut project. Their functionality is to figure out how to support their stars and how to support their larger brands. So when you're smaller, you have to have a movement, or you have to build a movement that sort of gets them to pay attention to what you're doing. So, those are the challenges. And it's not, like I said, it's a little scary, but it's not like you're just going to recoil and not do anything. We're all getting up every day and working to figure out how to do those sorts of things. And like Jesse said earlier, it's like there's a million different things, and I'm having a million conversations about how to do virtual shows and virtual interviews and all that sort of stuff. But nothing takes the place of being sort of in person and being able to touch people. And, with a show, nothing, takes the place of being there. And right now, to the point that he was making, it's not about money. And it wasn't about money right now in this moment for the artists that we're bringing forward. It really is about awareness. But I have friends that have major artists that they're like trying to figure it out right now because they have tours that are lined up that are specifically designed to make tons of money. And all of a sudden you can't gather people, and they're being impacted, the artists, and then everybody on down is being impacted.
And I think with micropayments, we'll start to see monetization to some extent. I feel like the first stage of this whole pandemic was really about trying things and putting things up and seeing what stick. And we saw some great traction, and we saw a lot of ideas that didn't work, but the ideas that worked really got followings. And, like Mark was saying, the versus effect has been huge for the artists that were down to do this early on. Phase 2, I feel like, is really about giving back. It's about charity. It's about relief. It's about helping people. It's really about flexing your humanity and empathy, because a lot of people are hurting right now. I feel like as we start to evolve into this new normal, people are going to start to realize that there's opportunities when you're putting 3, 4, 5 million people at an event to charge them $2, $5, $10 for something exclusive. And with very little production, you can make a lot of money and put a huge price tag on that. So I think that with kind of digital exclusivity and different ways to kind of gate content and micropayments, I think we're going to start to see payment coming in. And I think that there's going to be a great opportunity to monetize the right content and help subsidize some of the losses.
Jesse, you guys are probably one of the best examples of pivoting very, very quickly into a completely new business model relative to where you guys were a talent agency, and now you're in the brand marketing space, and you did that pivot very quickly. I mean, what advice can you give to record label executives who may be watching about how you guys were able to pivot so quickly, and some of the lessons that you learned from that experience that they can take in this critical moment that they need to think about pivoting as well?
Yeah, I think about this strategy called measure twice, cut once. And basically think about it, try to figure out where you're going, bring a team around you that can really help rebrand. And I was able to do that with NUE. We completely rebranded the company, new logo, new website, new mission statement, and then we dove in for it. We approached the market and we didn't look back. And it took an education process. There was still, and I'm sure you're looking at companies, record companies having their tour marketing division having to still explain what's going on. But the truth of the matter is there is not going to be tour marketing, or very little, and it should be a very digital and visual experience going forward. So I would not wait. I would almost go for it full force. And it takes putting a good team around that to strategize. But once you've got a plan, go for it, test, measure, and then double down on what works.
Hey, Jesse, was that pivot by your company something that you did literally as a reaction to to what was going on in the market, or was that something you already had sort of rolling at that time?
No, we thought it was coming. That pivot happened 5 years ago. So that pivot was where we saw much bigger creative ceiling than being a booking agent. we felt like there was just a bigger opportunity creating brands and working with brands to help them on campaigns.
Right.
So we just felt like there was an opening in the market to focus on that, and we could be a lot more entrepreneurial and flex our creativity. And so ultimately it was a decision that was in the works. And then eventually we just decided we were no longer going to represent any artists and we were going to completely shift our model. And through a rebrand and a couple choice new clients, we were able to launch and kind of never look back.
That's cool.
Natasha, I think you're on mute.
Of course.
Am I on mute?
No, you're
Nope,
good.
I am. That's awesome. I wanted to just pivot over to talk about Dua Lipa for a second. She obviously is one of the biggest Warner Music Group artists right now. You know, her team was really hesitant about releasing her sophomore album, Future Nostalgia, in March, mostly because of what's happening right now. And they didn't really know if it was a good investment to, you know, put it out there during this time, despite knowing that it was going to be, you know, not something that could support with tours and anything like that. But I am going to read a couple of stats that are fascinating from this entire case study, which is the record sold more than 1 million copies since its release, which has surpassed her first album. She was the most listened to act on Spotify for the month of April. And according to Bloomberg's Pop Star Power Rankings, generating over 400 million streams, she ranks #1 overall behind Bad Bunny and The Weeknd. And you know, to build the promotion for this record, her team licensed her music to online workout instructors and staged photo shoots from underneath her flat, which is so wild to me, in my opinion. But during this time, I mean, like, you have to pivot, you have to figure out creative ways to tackle what's happening. And that's exactly what they did. I mean, she, you know, would go on live streams with a green screen in her apartment so that she could appear for media appearances, do late night shows, which, you know, hosted by James Corden and Jimmy Fallon, just a whole bunch of stuff. So do you think that the success that Lipa's record is going to build a foundation for how other artists can promote their projects in the quarantine culture we're seeing? And if so, you know, is there anything about it that you find like is completely repeatable for someone else?
There's definitely elements of it that you can take from her campaign. I mean, she did an animated video also, which I think was successful, and I think that a lot of other artists can replicate, which is just using kind of digital creation. Now, those videos are expensive, but when you're an A-list, you know, Grammy award-winning artist, you can pull out all the resources. So I feel like she executed perfectly, or at least the best of her ability, in putting out the record, checking all the boxes, and doing the best she could in this environment. You know, and as things lax, the name of the game for her is going to be, or at least as things continue and progress throughout the summer, is staying relevant. So she's going to, I think that this case study is just the beginning. Sure, the numbers are there and that's great, but she's just going to have to kind of continue to stay top of the social graph if she wants her brand to resonate beyond just first week sales.
No, I think that's a great point. And I was going to just add, I think there's a lot of people doing a lot of cool things to expose their artists, great marketing initiatives, and they run the gamut from like Jesse said, from major priority artists where you're going to get the budgets and all the things that are put in place to get those things across, but to the ultra creative, to, you know, that's one of the things that I love about working with young artists, is that they don't see the limitations where we see the limitations. They just see opportunity. And there's a young artist somewhere doing something really, really incredible right now that's going to change the game, because the reality of this is the new normal. Like, I don't think it's going to, like, there's going to be some snapback button that returns everything to how it was. I think a lot of the things that we're seeing in terms of rollouts and ideas, they're going to be here for a minute. There's going to be some things that sort of return back, but then there's going to be some things that become part of how we do business as a result of all this.
Absolutely. It's a shift. I mean, it's going to be a progressive thing and people need to adjust. I also wonder if it makes sense you know, for someone like a duo, she just put out the entire album. So I wonder, you know, if there's going to be new music beyond that to try and keep momentum going, even though there's this whole slew of music that just came out. It's really just going to depend on kind of what their team is focusing on, whether that's just adding creative assets to support what's already been released musically, or, you know, collabs or something that can help support and sustain, you know, new listening or something like that. But yeah, I mean, fascinating.
And look, I think that kind of like leads us into like our next interesting topic here is, on the other hand, you have a lot of labels who are delaying really major albums. So far, the list includes Lady Gaga's next album, Alicia Keys, and Chris Antonucci, who is longtime, you know, major label A&R, actually was quoted saying, when it comes to big campaigns, I suggest that everybody holds a beat. You can't do anything from the phone or from Skype. You've got to be in front of people's faces, perform, and go on TV. If this continues, you can't travel to continue to promote your records. I think you should push back all major releases. This is a quote from one of his interviews with the Rolling Stones. So do you agree with that perspective? Like, do you agree that artists, labels, and managers, if they're handling these either big releases or like artists that are, you know, signed to major label with you know, big features? I know, Mark, I mean, you're definitely on, you know, a side with that as well. You know, what is your perspective here? And, you know, are you supposed to wait until it happens? What happens if COVID-19 comes back with a second wave and, you know, we still don't have a vaccine? Like, I'm really curious to, you know, maybe we could start with you, because I think.
Well, I know what Chris is saying, and when this all started, I'm not gonna lie, I had the same thoughts. Like, I was like, man, you know, pause everything, let's wait it out. But you just hit on it. It's like, man, we don't know what this is going to look like. We don't know how long this runway is. We don't know. And I think if labels take that approach, I think what they're going to be doing is creating opportunities for other people to walk through the door, because here's what's not going to happen. I don't think the kids are going to wait. I don't think the kids are going to wait to find new cool things to listen to and new artists to plug in with. Like life is in a weird place, but music and creativity still needs to come. So if that means that Gaga's got to wait and some of these artists got to wait, I get it. But it's going to open up the space a little bit for people who want to drop stuff, and particularly people who are interested in pushing out music and content. So I think for some, that might be the strategic play, but I think it's the world is open. It's a little bit of the wild, wild west at the moment, I think.
Yeah, and Jesse, we love your thoughts.
It's case by case at this point. I think it really depends on the artist and the agenda and the objective. I think that some regards, fans are starving for content and for music, and it's tough. If you have not made the album already, then it's very hard to make albums and music videos in this environment. You know, the thought was everybody during this quarantine time was going to go in and write the next classics. But the truth of the matter is, you can't go to the studio. You can't get together with people and collaborate. It's actually been a lot of people not creating and a little bit more on the shell shock side. So I think that you had to have made the album in advance. And the problem is, albums that were made in advance that are now coming out aren't speaking to the times. So do you really want to hear a fun-loving pop record when, you know, the world is suffering? Probably not. So it's a delicate balance. I think that we're going to see certain artists go into the studio and record records that are relevant to right now and being able to put them out. But we haven't really seen that connect beyond like TikTok bubblegum jams. And so I do think that it's a tricky balance. And I think that it's definitely not an absolute one way or another. It depends on the artist and it depends on the objective.
Yeah, I think, and I agree with what you're saying, but I think there's hip hop artists that are grinding right now. There's guys that are in there creating and they're going to put their stuff out. You know what I mean? Like that, because that world's not going to stop. You know, that part I can assure you, because they just grind. They grind through it all. And they're going to record. You know, I know people still recording. I know people still shooting videos. You know, people are rushing to try to get things out there, and I'm trying to figure it out too. But I understand I think there's going to be some real game-changing artists writing some game-changing music that reflect this time. But I don't think that's going to be everybody. That'll be a select few.
Yeah, I think it definitely opens up a huge opportunity for those who are just going in and saying, I'm not going to waste this time. You know, you guys can hang out, watch your TV, watch your Netflix, but I'm going to keep doing what I do. No, I respect that. I think that's awesome. Yeah. Well, and, you know, this kind of cycles us over to legacy artists, which, you know, I feel like a lot of people forget about all the legacy artists that a lot of labels have on their roster. You know, they're so tied to traditional means of success, you know, doing their tours, selling physical records. How do you think labels need to react and handle connecting with fans for those legacy artists of theirs? Whereas, you know, they are not used to connecting to like the digital ecosystem of fans like the Gen Z communities usually are.
I think it's fun to see these legacy artists move into a new world, right? And we saw that like with Versus. You put Babyface versus Teddy Riley, and all of a sudden they're more relevant than ever on Instagram Live and through this new platform. So I think it's fun to see legacy acts interact in this kind of way that they wouldn't back in their kind of so to speak prime. And so I find it like to be an opportunity because they've got catalog, they've got brand recognition, they've got name recognition, and again, they've got fans. So I like it. I like legacy acts. I even think these virtual worlds, sure, going to see Travis Scott in Fortnite is the biggest thing in music and video games. But imagine seeing Bob Marley play in Fortnite. Like that type of concert could be cool and could really reinvigorate that brand and that band's music. So I'd be interested in seeing creative ways to tap legacy acts too, and not just the kind of like new hot chart topper.
Yeah, and I think it's also like next steps as well. Like, you know, when Jesse brought up like sort of Babyface and Teddy and how they were able to gain so much attention, I actually think that was one of the verses that sort of took the viewership up to the next level. But then what's next? How do they capitalize on? And I'm sure they're thinking about it. I'm sure people are helping them try to think about it. But how do they take that? Because normally, like Babyface will go on a tour, and he tours. He's a touring artist. He's affected by what's going on now, but he has to find a way to sort of take the next steps and the next steps. You know, the catalogs. So I think they've all seen a bit of an uptick, you know, from those things. I think everybody's catalog has seen. Everybody who's appeared on that show has gone up a bit. But those guys really knocked one out of the park, and then they just had another tremendous one with Jill Scott and Erykah Badu. So I'm curious to see what's the next step of that for those artists and how they're able to capitalize and maybe make some money out of it. I don't know. Micro payments. Yeah. I like that. We got to get them some micro payments.
I know. They just need to figure it out. This is a good push. I think, you know, for legacy artists, a lot of them are pretty stubborn. They don't want to be on social media and they don't want to be figuring it out in this time. But I think this is an exciting time to see kind of what everyone's doing and pushing themselves, or at least their labels are pushing them to do, because it's necessary. You know, you don't want to, you're already a legacy artist. It already is a bit of a challenge, in my opinion, to stay relevant on the internet. So I think here's the opportunity to get along with, you know, the younger gens and figure out how to take over TikTok or whatever, you know, is coming up.
You know, and it's funny, I heard a brand marketer from Atlantic say that any record that you haven't heard is still considered new. And it's like there's a whole business right now in the back catalog side of these labels that are thinking about, okay, everybody's stuck inside. How do we get this old music into their ears and kind of make it new again? So, you know, definitely really fascinating stuff here. I want to go back to the creation side of music for a second. You know, we're hearing that, like, you know, artists that were and songwriters and producers that were able to fly to each other and create in person are now really having to use platforms like Zoom, Google Hangouts, etc., to actually create music when they're not able to physically be in the studios and in these spaces together. So I'm really curious, Mark, maybe we can start with you, because I know RZ3 has a recording studio as a part of its umbrella. How are you guys tackling creation if, you know, songwriters and producers and all these people can't get in the same room? And what are some of the challenges and opportunities you're seeing with some of the technology that's out there?
Well, it's really actually a lot of the music that people hear and they experience. Some of that was happening virtually anyway. you see, producers sending each other files and going, hey man, touch the drums on this, or vocals going back, from, cut vocals here, they go back over here for additional work and editing and things like that. So it's just a kind of another step along that same line. A lot of the virtual stuff. Now you obviously lose, some of the sort of the organic nature, particularly in the songwriting. You don't really want to write songs, or you don't want to have songs written that way. You still want songs, particularly if your artist is part of that, you want them to sort of be connecting with people and try to come up with something special. But once you sort of have the ideas, making the records, getting the feature, adding parts, between people who live in different states and even different countries, it's always been, it's just easier with the technology today. I know Cucurell, who's a vocal producer, who's actually has the capability of cutting vocals in real time, on both ends with no latency, no delay, anything like that. So there's technology evolving all the time to help this process, and that's something that he's had in the works for a couple of years, and it just so turned out that at this moment he's really utilizing it because he hasn't stopped working at all.
Wow. Yeah. Jesse, curious to, get your thoughts on this, and, maybe where, brands can play a role in helping, kind of bridge those gaps.
Yeah, I mean, can you just give me a little more context?
Yeah. So, obviously, like we were saying, like creation is just a harder thing right now, just given the circumstances. But do you see, brands having a place where they can kind of, provide opportunities, or, like maybe writing camps between brands? Like, I guess, where can the brand stand in terms of helping facilitate the creative energy needed to create, because that is still the lifeblood of the music business. And I feel like there's an opportunity for brands that I'm sure, you're speaking to all the time with brand marketers.
Absolutely. We've got a big philosophy that brands are the patrons of the arts right now, and that, sure, there aren't Club Live or Tao Group or a lot of these kind of venues that can throw these events to support artists. So in a lot of ways, brands are the way to step up and give these artists exposure and really enable the creative process. So I definitely see this as a big opportunity for brands to step in and make compelling content and really help and support artists, which will build goodwill in the artist community, which can be very valuable later on.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And we're seeing examples of it. We're seeing, Levi's doing daily shows, and Arizona Iced Tea doing things, and Gap and Oikos, the yogurt brand, did the official NFL after party, which was like the only opportunity for there to be an after party for the NFL draft. And so, they're the ones that are hosting it and getting the talent and putting the promotion together and attaching to charity. And there just isn't a way to do that otherwise. So there's a big opportunity. A, it's beneficial to brands, and B, it's beneficial to the industry. And I think now more than ever, these relationships need each other more than can help each other. And I think brands want that. It's just about helping to build that bridge.
Yeah, and you're one of the few firms that's, really taken this and have done it at, the pinnacle. So, we're really excited to see all the stuff that NUE's, got planned for the rest of 2020. So, Natasha.
Yep. So pivoting back to artists for a second, we talked legacy artists, we talked A-list artists, but we really haven't talked about developing artists. And I think, the majority of artists are really in that category. So, for developing during this time, how are labels, managers, artists developing themselves without the traditional availabilities that they had before? There's a larger conversation centered around if it's like tone dead for an artist to release music during this time that doesn't have a cause associated with it, or if they should be releasing more now than ever because there's more and more focus digitally than ever before for, you know, consumers. So I just would love to know y'all's thoughts between the two.
You want to take it, Jesse? Oh, you want to start with me?
Start with Mark. Yeah.
The approach that we're taking is we're ramping up. We're going to put out more music, and I'm not saying it's the right answer. A lot of what's going on right now is just you're trying things. It's trial and error. You don't know what's going to stick. You don't know what's going to cut through. But for our developing artists, which we have a few, we're taking the approach. We're going to put music out. We're going to try to seek this moment and seize the opportunity to let people hear what we're doing, try to draw our attention and build fans and build awareness sort of brick by brick and step by step, because you're going to need to do that anyway. Now, what you can't do is the things that you would normally do, but we're going to try to do more music. We're going to try to put out more tracks, remixes. We're going to try to put out a lot of different stuff to let people know that we're here and cross-pollinate our artists, cross-pollinate with other developing artists, and just try to use this summer into the fall to just push a lot of stuff out and try a lot of different things for exposure and see what works. And if something really works, then we're going to really drill down on it.
Yeah. So, with that said, I think the last topic that I think, everybody can really touch on here is, surprisingly, streaming has gone down. So the numbers just last week, Billboard reported that streaming as a whole was down 3.5% just within the week. From a cumulative perspective, since the U.S. started its lockdown, it's about down between 7 and 10%. So with streaming representing about 60 to 70% of a label's revenue and about 20 to 30% of any general artist revenue, how do you see this dip in streaming activity impacting, let's say, labels' business models or even artists' business models if this trend of social distancing and quarantine continues, let's say, into the next 12 months? Do labels really need to think about, their revenue a little differently? I mean, Jesse, we can start with you because this was a topic that was brought up to you in your most recent Cheddar interview. And you had a pretty interesting take on it. So, we'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that the streaming dip is just temporary. I mean, I think that there was some form of correction on the fact that there aren't people using Spotify or streaming services when they're in the gym, when they're commuting, when they're walking in and out of stores. So there was like a little bit of a hit, but I think that that's we're seeing is correcting. And I think that the record labels were doing extremely well, making $1 million an hour in streaming money. And I think that even if it took a little bit of a hit, ultimately long term, it's going to be a streaming world. And this is just going to only make it more so. And I think that the record labels are smart. They've got big purse, and they'll figure out how to adjust. I don't see streaming taking a long-term hit. I think that we're seeing across the board that streaming numbers are up, and on the music services, I think quickly they're going to catch up as well. It's just going to be different habits. I think Daniel Ek said, in this day and age, every day feels like a weekend in terms of streaming habits.
Wow. It's pretty powerful coming from him with the largest streaming audience base. I mean, Mark, you guys are on the label side. Curious to get your thoughts. Are you just as bullish on streaming as Jesse?
I was gonna say the same thing. I think it'll all level out. These things happen in any industry really, and then there's, like he said, correction was probably on the way anyway. But no, I think I'm with him. I think it's gonna. You gotta press forward with whatever your philosophy is. Now, if you're the labels and you're determining how to spend, maybe it changes how they spend a little bit. You hear about some ridiculous deals that are out there. Maybe they back off of that a little bit, and maybe there's a little bit more sort of grassroots investments. I don't know. I don't think a lot about their model. I think about sort of the breaking of artists and at the level that we operate. But, they're dealing with so much money that they just have to figure out how they allocate. But when it's all said and done, that nothing's going to change. You know, this is all going to sort itself out, and they'll be making, what do you say, $1 million a day in streaming. They'll
An
be back
hour.
there.
Yeah, an hour.
$1 million an hour. They'll be back there in no time.
That's good. Well, Jesse, know you're on a tight schedule, but I just want to get one last word from you before you leave us. Like, can you just give us a couple predictions on, you know, what you think, label executives should hear about what, a post-quarantine or post-COVID and post-recession environment looks like for them, and what you would want them to hear?
I think it's too soon to say post because we don't have enough information. I think we got to look at the summer. This is more than ever impossible to predict where things are going. So in terms of the summer, I think it's going to be about flexing creativity. I think it's going to be about bespoke events. I think it's going to be about creating opportunities that cut through the noise. I think it's going to be about consistently staying on top of the social graph. I think it's going to be about partnerships. More than ever, it's partnerships with the virtual world, partnerships with the video game world, partnerships with brands. I think anything that can help bring awareness is going to be a good thing. I think the push is going to be towards streaming, and maybe even there's a way to create new deals with the streaming companies so that artists can get paid a little bit more, rewrite the royalty rates, something of that nature to help subsidize the touring losses. And I think it's going to be about fan club experiences, VIP experiences. I think we're going to reinvent the album release. And I think the one thing you know about music is that music is the most versatile, quick to adjust, easy to adapt. We're the Trojan horse. We're in the trenches. We're in everybody's ears. It's the universal language. It's the great connector. Music was the first industry decimated by the digital revolution and the first to build back successfully in that capacity. And the music business was very, very, very healthy 3 months ago. And fortunately, I think it's going to, again, be a really creative time. And we got a bunch of ideas. And I think we're going to see every week more and more things popping up. And I think the record labels need to be thinking about that and really kind of try to bring in fresh concepts and fresh partnerships.
Yeah, if we can get through Napster, we can get through this pretty much.
Very inspiring words.
Before
you leave, also give us a, let people know where they can find you before you head out.
Sure. I'm at Jesse K, Jessekay on Instagram and Twitter. And then I got a weekly newsletter called Beats and Bytes, which chronicles everything happening in music, tech, and brands. And I'd love you to subscribe. It's on LinkedIn. It's also on the web, and it comes in on Wednesday morning. So we got a new one dropping tomorrow. So
and, he's got a great live show too, just so everybody knows. It's amazing. Thanks a
lot, Clay.
Yeah, he brings amazing people on there. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for coming on. And I know you got to go.
Nice to meet you, Jesse.
All right, Mark. So I just want to get your last, word here before we open it up to audience Q&A real quick, because I know a couple cues came in specifically for you. So just want to get your last word on what you want label executives and some of these label professionals to hear and artists.
No, I think like two things that I anticipate. One, from in the studio, from a creative point of view, I just think there's going to be a pivot shift. There's going to be some magic created. I think, and I hate to keep talking about verses, but I think it's been such a game changer. What people are hearing, whether it's that format or the formats that are sort of in the same lane, they're reintroducing themselves to what that great songwriting sounded like and why we love those songs. Whether they were from the 90s or early 2000s, there's a reason why we love that. And I think that's going to inspire new creativity where you're going to hear other great songs coming back as opposed to things that are lit or that are turned. You're going to hear stuff that has a little bit more meat on the bones from a song perspective. That's inside. And then I think outside, sort of along with what Jesse was saying, I think there's going to be things that are going to be birthed right now that will become part of the way we do business in the future. It's like, I look at it a lot like, pre 9/11, you could walk into an airport and go to a gate and meet your family and do things. And then post 9/11, you couldn't do that anymore. And it's like, now we go through, we take our shoes off, you take your computer out and do all these things and it's the new normal. I think there are going to be things, tactics, approaches, marketing ideas that stick from this period that are going to be done down the line, and people are going to look back and go, that pivot and change happened when we had the pandemic and when we had Corona and all that. So I think that'll be sort of my two predictions. Like there's going to be some magic in the studio creatively, and then there's going to be some things that are not just short-term adjustments. There'll be things that stick and become part of the way we do business.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good to hear. You know, that you know, you're looking at this as such a positive light, and you know, it's just another bump in the road. And like you're saying, so we got a couple questions here. One being on the tour development side. How are you thinking about getting artists prepared to go on the road, and what is your timeline like in terms of what you're telling, you know, you're developing artists who obviously I don't think going on the road and the, you know, touring is going to be a business that's going to be hit for like forever. Obviously at some point venues will come back, they will figure out different ways to make it safe for consumers to feel safe. You know, I believe in Michael Rapino and everybody at Live Nation to make that happen. But how are you keeping artists prepared and ready to go on the road for when that time happens?
Once things open up a little bit more in terms of how people can interact with each other, you can get artists back in rehearsals and you know, something that we were doing on a pretty regular basis. But the honest answer is not, and this is not a sexy answer at all, but we don't know. You know, we don't know what the time frame is because we don't know what the habits of the consumer is going to be. You know, a lot of what's going to happen with the industry will be a response to how people are reacting in other businesses. I mean, believe it or not, the live touring people are going to be looking at sports and go, okay, well, when, you know, do you anticipate there being a concert before there's a attendance at a football game? I don't think so. You know, I think, you know, when or a basketball game or a baseball game. So there'll be things that happen in society that will sort of, I think live music will probably be bringing up the rear when it comes to that sort of thing. So you can't really say until you start to see some of these other dominoes fall.
Very true.
No, yeah, very, very true. And just another question in here too. So one manager is finding that it's really hard to get licensing clearing for doing songs on live streams. And I'm curious, I guess, to get your thoughts on this. Do you think that the live streaming you know, platforms like YouTube, Twitch, and all of these have to really think about, like, you know, redoing their licensing a little bit so that you can sing a song that maybe somebody else has a credit on, that maybe with Universal Publishing or some of the big publishing houses, so it's not such a issue to think about, like, what songs you have to do before that? Will they clear the live stream? I know that was a problem, I think, with Teddy Riley and Babyface's first verses. I think the first technical time they had the technical issue, but they had to get some clearances done. So, I mean, yeah, you've been on the clearance side for a long time. You know that process. So I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Everybody's got to meet in the middle. I mean, it's got to, from the publisher side, they have to relax a little bit and put maybe some more manpower to get these things done. I'm not suggesting that they turn away and let things happen. People got to make money and they have to be able to monetize, even if it's small pennies. But you got to put some manpower behind it so that it's not a headache to get it done. And then, you know, so like everybody's got to sort of meet in the middle. Like people have to understand that these things have to get done. You can't, like if you're on the service side, you got to help. You got to help get these things done. You just can't say, okay, well, you know, we can't do it because it's not cleared. It's like those worlds have to come closer together, because this might be, again, not to beat the dead horse, but this might be more of the new norm of people trying to figure out how to expose their music that they've collaborated with other people and just get clearances. Now, guys like me that know our way around this space, we can pick up the phone, we know who to call, we can get things done, but it's a little bit harder if you're new, if you're independent, you know what I mean? Or if you just don't have those, you know, 30 years worth of relationships that I have to be able to get those things done. So I think those just worlds got to come a little bit closer together.
Great. And one of the last questions here, I thought this was pretty thought-provoking. Do you think that because of the constraint that record labels may feel on the financial side, that there are going to be less signings in the future, let's say for the next fiscal year? And do you think that marketing budgets are also going to be tied up? And if that's the case, how much are you predicting, or I guess across the board, how tight budgets may become? So I guess it's a two-part question.
I think I feel like marketing budgets will get tighter before they stop signing, because this is just my take on it. I think that new music, hot new music, things that are hot in the street is always sort of the lifeblood of a label. So they're always going to have that budget to sign new artists. They might allocate it a little bit differently. They may not spend as top heavy. And like I said earlier, they might work the bottom up, as opposed to the top down. But I think where they're really going to tighten the screws is going to be on marketing and force the artist to be more creative. I think they're going to say, hey, you need to be more creative, or, unless you have that hot sizzling record, they're just going to kind of move on and then try to find that next thing that's, more of the low hanging fruit for them. So if I had to guess, I would say the impact will be more in marketing spend than in A&R spend.
Yeah,
that's good to know.
Good to know. Well, I think that covered all of our audience Q&A. So, Mark, Natasha and I just want to thank you so much for giving us your time. A lot of people, I think, got a lot of bits of information here that I think are going to really, help them navigate this time. Where can they find you? Give us if they want to follow you and follow your thoughts, or.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to follow me just day to day, I'm on IG. MES Red Zone is my handle, but also if you want to follow sort of what the movements of my new company, mine and Trick and Judy's new company is RZ3Recordings.com. You can check in there. That's sort of the hub for all of our artists and all their all their moves and things, and then you can use our site to go visit them and get to know them more, which is really what I want you to do. You get to know my artist. You don't need to know me. You need to know my artist.
Yeah. And trust me, I have had the pleasure of working with one of Mark's artists, Michaela, who I promise you is so damn good. The music is so solid, and we really hope and pray that you release more music soon, because that record Lost and what's the other one that you got Lost in? You got
mine is out, and we're actually about to drop a single featuring G-Eazy called Pass It that we're going to drop the first week of June. So
you heard it here first.
Yeah, that's an exclusive information drop.
I have probably played that record 70 to 100 times, and you know that one's true, because Judy sees it on the stream. That's funny. On the stream link. Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Natasha. I really appreciate you guys.
Yeah, really appreciate it. And we'll make sure we'll put all Michaela's links and stuff in the bio too, so that everybody can go follow.
Yeah. MKXYZ. That's MKXYZ.
MKXYZ. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you again, Mark.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, we concluded another amazing episode of number 3. I think a lot of people got a lot of stuff out of this. I mean, there was a lot to really soak in there. I think what people should take out of this, though, is that the music industry is going to be okay. People, Mark and Jesse were pretty bullish on the outlook of recorded, and that's just positive to hear. These are guys who've been in the business for many, many years. So
yeah, when you've seen the ups and downs, you can definitely see ahead. I think, right now it's really important to just be mindful of your digital strategy. That should have been important before, but if you were stubborn or your artist was stubborn at that point, now it's time to focus, figure out what's authentic to that artist and their audience, because that's, not every strategy works for every artist and their fans. So I think that's something that, is important to mention. And yeah, I think things will get better. It's just now, the summer of testing and trying new things and seeing what works and learning from your peers, and hopefully people taking, what we're doing here as a resource. And yeah, we need to talk to some venues soon, because that's some interesting things.
It's funny you say that. I mean, everybody who's still on, and thank you again for staying on with us for almost an hour now. We got an amazing panel, Natasha and I, next week. called Venues versus COVID-19. And that one's going to be amazing. We got the head of Pianos New York City. We got the owner and head talent buyer at SOBs New York City, which has broken so many amazing artists. So we're going to hear directly from the venues on how they are looking at their future, the future of touring. So please, we're going to send up a new event link probably tomorrow at some point because we're really excited for this one. And I just want to say thank you again to Mark and to Jesse. We'll make sure we put where you can follow them and everything in our description.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Follow us on Instagram. Our handle for this series is Let's Fast Forward. There is always going to be an updated link to the next event, live event that we're doing so that you can always keep up with that. We're also putting our past episodes on YouTube for a YouTube account that we just made. So if you missed the first two, go listen to them. They're pretty awesome. We talk about so many interesting things, and we, interview some really talented people in the industry who have worked with artists, ranging from superstars to developing. So yeah, keep up with what we're doing. We've got a lot more of these coming up. So hopefully,
yeah, we got 2 months of these things scheduled. So every Tuesday at 6 p.m. This is where we'll be, and I just think, to end it on a good note, like I said, every independent artist out there that's struggling, every venue, just know that the best minds between Mark, Jesse, and all these amazing people that we haven't even spoken to yet are all thinking about how to solve these issues. So something's gonna click real soon. So we're bullish on that. Well, thank you so much again, everybody. Let's fast forward. Go follow that. Go follow Natasha. She's got one of the best Instagrams in the game. I love her IG. It's no wonder she's got like 10,000 followers or something like that. So I appreciate you all, and yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much.
See you guys next week. Bye.